You know, racing's all I ever wanted to do. It's all I ever thought about as a kid. If it had wheels, I raced it. But it wasn't easy getting to where I am today. You know, was I good enough? Did I have what it takes?
Wow!
We saw the coolest guy on TV, and he was talking about racing. Man, he was wearing this killer white suit, and he was wearing some crazy hat that must have been from some fancy store in New York City.
Oh, I bet you I could do that.
Well, the show, that was Car and Track, and the guy, that was Bud Lindeman.
This will be a hot 30 minutes. We'll be ready to go in 60 seconds.
I knew right then and there that if I didn't make it as a race car driver, I was going to be the host of my own show.
All right, Brad, are you ready? Welcome to the Daytona 500.
Well, turns out the racing deal worked out. So being a host, that had to be put on hold for a while, until now. Have you ever wanted to go back before there was smoke?
Tony Stewart lights them up.
Or the Rainbow Warriors?
You guys are awesome!
Before safer barriers or restrictor plates? When the king ruled?
When the Petty Blue flies under the checkered flag, winner of the 15th annual Daytona 500.
And the Silver Fox ran wild.
And David Pearson wins the Motor State 400.
Well, come on, we're going back in the day. In the late 60s and the early 70s, Bud was the only place to get your racing fix. Take it away, Bud.
A door-to-door, go-for-broke, rip-it-up style of racing.
And suddenly, the Alabama air rings with the sound of power. They're wound up now and flying. Look out!
You see, back then, only Bud and his cameras caught all the action.
We're down here in the great state of Georgia.
Michigan International Speedway.
North Carolina Motor Speedway.
Now I'm giving these races a new twist. We're going to watch some of these heroes of the golden era.
David Pearson, Bobby Allison, Cale Yarbrough, Richard Petty, Benny Parsons.
And gain some knowledge of the times. Yeah. We're going back in the day. I had a friend named Joe Whitlock, who was an editor and a writer for a lot of NASCAR publications, and he had a huge library of magazines and photos and just a lot of history of the sport. And I'd go over to his house just to read these books. And he had some tapes, and it was car and track shows. He had 2 tapes, and there was about 20 shows on each tape. And I talked him into letting me borrow them. And I must have kept them for 5 years, and I've watched them over and over, countless times, like twice a week, you know, for years. And you'd always see something new. Every time you watched this little highlight reel of the race, you'd always see something new, you know. And it was just, it was the easiest way to learn about David Pearson and Buddy Baker and Bobby Allison before actually, you know, when I came into the sport or got old enough to really know what was going on. They were racing, but I didn't know where they came from or what type of guy they were back then, and so it was an awesome way to really get introduced into the sport.
Here comes Richard Petty on foot, and his guest for the day, Hollywood star Darren McGavin, runs out to greet him.
I had watched Car and Track on them videotapes for years, and then all of a sudden Speed starts airing it on television. But the times when they aired it was all over the place. You know, it was on in the middle of the night, early in the morning, in the middle of the afternoon. You never knew when to catch it, you know. And so I was doing my best trying to watch it when I could. And I started calling around trying to find the source of these tapes and trying to find I wanted the whole library for myself, because I'd lost the videotapes that I'd loaned them out to Chocolate Myers that worked on my dad's cup team, and I never got them back. So I was trying to find the source of these tapes, and I'm like, you know, I gotta get this library for myself so I can watch it again. And we were talking about doing a production company with my company, and we were throwing around some ideas for TV shows, just throwing them off the wall and seeing what would stick. And we didn't even know we could even make a show, but we were trying to come up with some cool ideas. And I was thinking, you know, man, they need to bring Car and Track back. I said, instead of just bringing the show back like it was, because it showed on Speed for 3 or 4 years and that was it. But maybe we could do a new twist. Aside from me being involved in it, we could have some kind of information about the times, you know, and I was thinking pop-up video like on VH1, you know, and took some ideas from that show and hit on points that were interesting and consistent, such as the minimum wage thing, cost of living, and things like that. Those are things that are interesting because the races are all within about 10 years, and you can kind of watch each show and see how life changed back then. You know, from minimum wage to cost of living and whatnot, what it costs to buy a house and inflation and all that. So, and you find out a lot of stuff about, you know, movies and music and a lot of cool things, and it was fun throwing those ideas around and you know, trying to come up with a show that'll be fun to watch. People that like to see the old races will be able to watch the races, listen to Bud talk about the races and talk about the drivers in the season as it's going. And also, if maybe you're not such a history buff, but you do like, you know, you do want to watch the show, you can, you know, you'll find some interest in the pop-ups and things like that that you'd never even thought of. What's more patriotic than hamburgers and hot dogs and the Great American Race? Every driver I know, myself included, will race just about anything. Welcome to 8 Ball Speedway, my own personal downsized version of Bristol. Are y'all ready to strap on the 6-shooters and film a Western or what? No? All right, well, I'm gonna go in here and get me a cold one then. See y'all later. We shot every one of the episodes on my property here in Mooresville, and I mean, you know, it would have been sort of egotistical to say, here we are on my property near the front gate. Here we are on my property next to the barn. I mean, but it was fun, you know, kind of doing that and not really letting people in on it. So everybody now knows that the whole show was shot within 150 yards of my house, every one of them. We were thinking, all right, we're going to shoot the go-kart track, and I had as you see behind me, we got some late model cars, and 3 or 4 of my buddies race them. Got a mechanic or 2, and a couple more guys that are foremen for the property. And so we drug a couple of them down there, fired off some go-karts, and just wanted them to run some laps. And we needed to wet the track when we had a water truck, so we had to run, and it was getting dusty, and we'd had to stop for a while and let the dust settle down. Then they could go about another lap while I spit out the intro or whatever, the tease for the commercial or whatever. But everything that they did was unscripted, like they raced or wrecked or whatever. Whoa! Who is that? And that one time where they're piled up on the front straightaway, I don't know what happened there, but I didn't even hear them wrecking. And I turned around and they was in a wad behind me. On my property, I built a mock saloon. Sort of a western town, just somewhere we can hang out on a porch and me and my buddies can drink some cold ones. But everybody probably assumes that we went somewhere off my property or out of Mooresville to shoot that. We shot that down on my property.
This year, over 103,000 people jammed into this shrine of speed. And if excitement sold for $1 a pound, you could become a millionaire.
Suddenly, there's a Tennessee earthquake as all the power in the world charges down for the green flag.
Hey, they're getting flat on with it. These boys are playing for keeps.
Look out! This is the kind of racing that makes NASCAR #1.
The appeal of the show for me was the racing, seeing the cars run, but Bud has these little slogans.
When you turn 40 stockers loose on a half-mile track, you've got traffic you wouldn't believe.
Crazy stuff he just comes up with when cars wreck or something.
Look out, front shoot!
And then you start watching Bud, like when, you know, when he's doing the intros to the show, what he's wearing and all this stuff.
Hi there. Welcome into action time.
The place to be is Darlington. It makes it the fastest track on the NASCAR circuit.
He did the beginning of the show from his home or his studio or whatever, and he had all these little cheesy panel backgrounds and stuff, and he'd have these little sports coats on. You know, probably back then it was perfect. You know, back then it was nobody, you know, even batted an eye at it, but nowadays, you know, it's just pretty funny. He seemed like an intricate guy, you know, a really unique kind of person. All right, Bud, give us that line you give us every week.
So till next week, drive carefully, won't you? All the pros do.
He'd always have his little slogan at the end, but we liked that one, and that was our favorite, so we wanted to continue to use it. And sort of the sit boo-boo sit kind of deal. And then we came on at the end with the Hammerhead Entertainment logo, which is me at like 6 years old. This picture that I had that I'd always wanted to use. I got this big old polyester shirt on with this big old collar. and bowl cut haircut. It's perfect. But we were just trying to have some fun. You know, the show is, you know, it's in light of, you know, all the hard racing those guys did back in the day. You know, everything that was happening around them was kind of crazy compared to what, as far as, you know, people's habits is how they dressed and what they did and stuff. But, you know, the outfits were crazy. I wanted to point that out. I wanted to holler at the obvious. You couldn't take anything really humorous or ridiculous from the racing. I mean, the racing was what it was. It was pure and serious and dedicated and right there in your face. And this was the root, you know, of what we see now. And it was awesome. It's just really awesome. So you know, we glorified that as much as we could. But it was fun to really pick on, I guess, sort of the outfits and, you know, the whole way society performed, you know, back then. You know, how they camped out and what they drove to the track and what their tents looked like, and little racks on their trucks and stuff that they got on top of to watch the races, and, you know, just how really into it they were at that time. You know, you look at fans now, very passionate about the sport, you know. What were fans like back in the 70s when it was a smaller, you know, core group of fans? You know, we weren't nationwide as far as the sport goes back then. So it's really cool to really see exactly, it's really the same. I mean, as far as the passionate, you know, how into the sport they were. I don't think personally that athletes do forget past history and who the greats were and who their idols were. I don't think they forget. I think that, you know, America and the media as a whole are quick to put that on you and put that sort of claim on you. And so, yeah, it is a little bit of a mission for me to say, hey, you know, let me tell you, man, if anybody's crazy about the history of the sport, it's me, you know. And so, I mean, every time I talk to Benny Parsons, you know, I know and I sense when I'm standing next to him that I'm standing next to somebody who's seen a lot, done a lot, somebody who's great. You know, there's a lot of, I sense that. You know, even though my popularity is where it is in the sport and I've done what I've done, I still, when I stand next to him, I still feel maybe a tenth of what he is, you know. And to look at those guys now and think that they were doing that back then, man, I mean, it's amazing. But, you know, it's just, you know, you see Donnie Allison walk through the garage, and the first thing I think about is that red 27 pulling into Victory Lane at Rockingham in '68, you know, and that he was the man behind the wheel of that car. You know, it's just it's hard to put those two together. You know, it's just too much, it's just overwhelming to put it, you know, honestly. You know, I've asked a lot of the drivers what the cars drove like compared to now. I don't know if some of the drivers that race today, including myself, could drive those cars and be successful, you know. Maybe we could, I don't really know, you know. It seemed like that the way the cars drove and how the sport was evolving, only a few guys had the skill, you know. It was a lot tougher. And so there was a big difference in equipment, obviously, from good to bad. Big tolerance where in the sport now, you know, everybody's pretty much got the same equipment, build the same race car. Sometimes I long for walking through the garage and just seeing the mechanics, you know, the drivers under the hood. You know, if we could go in the garage today and all you saw was the 4 or 5 guys that were the road crew, the drivers would be under the hood with them. And our focus is not as much working on the cars as, you know, like it used to be growing up. When I grew up, I worked on my own cars, and there came a day where that was cut off immediately. You know, wasn't an option anymore, and that was tough. You know, that was something I really enjoyed, and I think that's something I wish was part of the sport now. Back then, the drivers, they worked on their cars and they were tuning on their cars, and Bobby Allison, he had a strong opinion of what was in his car and what setup was in his car, how it went to the racetrack. You know, that's something that I wish was still the same. If I was going to have my dream race, it'd probably be Talladega, 1974. the year I was born. It's a fast track. I like racing there. If the cars were difficult to drive, that'd be the easiest track to drive them on. So I'd like to know what the draft was like back then, how it worked, how effective it was and stuff like that. Slingshot pass. We don't really do the slingshot pass anymore, and I don't know if we ever have as far as me, but I'd like to be a part of that. You have to have, you know, all the guys that raced back then.
This is the starting field for the 5th annual running of the Winston 500. 50 of the fastest, most powerful late model stock cars in the world, piloted by some of the premier drivers of NASCAR.
We obviously have David Pearson and Buddy Baker and Richard Petty and Bobby Allison, Cale Yarborough. I'd give Cale extra 10 horsepower just to make sure if I didn't win, he did. I never really tried to emulate anybody or be like anybody, but he's the one I think I are the most similar to.
Bill Champion, Randy Tissett, Dick Brooks,
Pedro Rodriguez, Kevin Terrace,
Cuckoo Marlin, Herschel McGriff, Marty Robbins,
Lenny Pond, Skip Manning,
G.C. Spencer.
Jimmy Vandiver. Jimmy Vandiver raced in the 70s and actually ran pretty well on a limited schedule. He came up to me. I'd always wanted to meet him. I watched these. He's a perfect example. I watched these shows that when Joe gave me them tapes when I was a kid, and I'm thinking, who is this? I've never heard of this Jim Vandiver guy, and he seems to be in the top 10 quite often, and I'm like, I should have heard of him. I was sort of disappointed that I didn't know who he was, you know, so I'd always sort of wanted to know or meet him. Didn't know where he was, what he was doing today. He came up to me at Daytona this year, said, hey man, I'm Jim Vandiver, I was in the show. You know, I've raced back then. I'm like, God, man, you know, I sort of locked up, but I wish he knew exactly how cool that was to actually meet him. And, you know, to not have known him, but yet have so much respect for him at the same time, that was a really cool moment for me. That was, you know, really one of the bigger parts of that whole Speed Weeks for me. All right. I'm nervous. Man, it was awesome. You're gonna hear, let me try again. Hope you got a lot of film. I sound just like Bud there. All right. I sort of like to just jump on in and not really talk about it or not a lot of mental preparation. I can't think of how I'm wanting to start. What did I want to say? A record I would break. Pressure. It's getting to me. Can't you just throw some music over it? When I start to do that, I become scripted and less animated. Here we go, 1973, the South Season, and a lot less personality comes out. I need to slow down a little bit. Yep. You know, so anything I really, as far as races, races, the show, my radio show, anything that I get involved in, I just like to totally not even think about it until it's time to do it, and when we do it, we do it. All right, am I good? This is hard. And then, you know, once we're starting and we're working, you know, then the details get moved around. You position things how you want them. But for 10 years, we took an annual trip there every year. Well, that is every year. I know, I just had to think about it. This was tough. Obviously, you know, if somebody gives you a piece of paper and tells you to memorize something, that's the easiest way to do it. I want to say, stop for a second. I'm gonna just pick it up from there. I need the paper. But it just doesn't sound genuine. It was fun. I mean, we would, you know, obviously you had the points of who won the race, where the race was, what time of year it was. You just sort of knew a little bit about, I mean, obviously I'd watched all of it 100 times, so I knew a lot about the race itself. So I'm gonna send it back to Bud for the finish of the race.
One taker. Beautiful. That's his name. One taker. Absolutely beautiful. Perfect.
It was easy for me to kind of make it my own, you know, as far as the intros and all that stuff. And it was fun to really, I think I meant that part of my life to where it's time to take on that role more often. And so this show was a way for me to try that and sort of get used to that coat, you know. I was able to change things I wanted to change and had the freedom to do those type of things and shoot where we wanted to shoot and how we wanted to shoot. And it's nice to have sort of like a little bit of leadership as well, you know. And like I said, we had a great crew that did a lot, and you know, they were the most creative of the entire bunch. But you know, it was fun to be able to have a little bit of leadership to where things could get changed. I could change them, and it wasn't really just here, read the script. I got a friend of mine I want to do a reality TV show about. It's just basically, Josh Schneider's his name, and he's my friend, one of my best friends, or my best friend. He's on my radio show with me every week, and I think he'd be great for a reality show, and it's really up to him whether he wants to do it or not. And I've tried to talk to him. We've been bouncing around for about 4 years now. Obviously, I want to keep doing Back in the Day, and there will be a time when there's no more footage. You know, Bud only did so many shows, and I'd like to keep doing Back in the Day, but we'll have to funnel in new material or newer material or different types of stuff from other networks, and it might kind of get confusing or crazy, or maybe even impossible, but we'll just have to see. I like sort of digging into the history of the sport and bringing that onto the scene today. I like having footage from back then. I don't want to sit around with Richard and ask him a bunch of questions of what it was like. I want footage of him back then, you know, and so we may be able to, you know, get into some libraries of some people's personal stuff and do some cool things, you know. In this show, we're going back to 1969. I can't get enough of those old Western movies. Well, today we're going back to 1971, but keep your eye on the screen, because you never know what might pop up when you go back in the day. I mean, it's a pretty strong show. I'd like to keep twisting on it and tweaking it a little bit, and you know, doing things a little different each time, but keeping the basis of the show the same. But it's great. I mean, everybody seems to really enjoy watching it. I think that they'll enjoy the DVD, and hopefully we'll have a lot of success with it in the future. Well, a far less interesting race is happening right here at the dirt track, and I'm gonna put the wraps on it. I don't know who won. What do y'all think? Maybe we'll figure it out before the next Back in the Day. Well, I hope that answers all, or at least some of your questions about Back in the Day. You know, at the end of each show, we always had Bud wrap it up with a little bit of wisdom.
So till next week, drive carefully, won't you? All the pros do.
But you know, back in the day, I had a pretty good closer too.
All right, folks, drive safely. Cut, I gotta go. Hello.